Okay, so where we left off was I had some different options for text blocking around my spot illustration. I'm doing it on my black and white, just line work, and sketching on top of that at a pretty high resolution because this will become my poster. But the reason I'm using my black and white line work is I don't want the colors that I chose for coloring to affect my text decisions yet. I want everything to work graphically first, so to work in terms of black and white shapes first, and that was the same thing for logo design. It's going to be the same thing for type design. You want it to work in black and white before you color it. So I have this idea. I kind of like it. I'm not so sure about the circles, but that's why I have some alternates here. But this shape seemed a little repetitive and boring, but maybe I can play with that shape for what Texas would look like. I do like the idea of it kind of wrapping behind the illustration and still hopefully being readable. And that looks kind of nice. It's almost like a badge. And I'm drawing digitally because I get to use all of our compositing skills here using transforming. And even though it's just kind of where the text will go, this will really help inform how it's designed. Okay, so once you have a sketch you're happy with, this is called the blocking of the text. Then you can roughly block out how you think the lettering might work. And I just do that in sections first. So since Texas is 5 letters, it would block out kind of like that. And the way you do type design is you think of each of these little channels as holding ink. And when you drop a letter in, a letter like a capital T, any negative space around that letter, around the T, you think of being filled up with ink, right? So pretend this is all filled up with ink. Now when I put an E in there, in that same amount of space, notice that a lot less ink or water, or however you want to think of it, you can think of them as little tanks where you're dropping the letter in and you're seeing how much water is left over. So here we have quite a bit of water left over around the T, but around the E we have about 50% less water around it. So what does that mean? That means in type design you want to build more space between those letters, because you want to kind of even out the amount of negative space around each letter. Then for the X, it's about equal to the T and how much space that takes up. And here I'll turn off my line work so you can see that a little more clearly. And this is not a type design class, it's not a typography class, but these are things to keep in mind as you're working on it. So you see the negative space around the X in the way I'm kind of envisioning it, and this would be if I actually designed my own typeface. This is how I would think. That space is not quite as much as the T, so I'd want to add a little bit more space at the edges of that as well. And then the A gives you actually very little space, but it depends how it's designed. And so I might redesign the A to be kind of wider at the top. And then the S can actually give you quite a bit of negative space around it, so I could probably squeeze that more, so that you're kind of equaling the amount of negative space around each letter form. Now there's a few ways to do that. The easiest way is to play with what's called kerning. So the space between letters, this space here, this is called kerning. And I'm going to show you how you can adjust that. It's something we play with in Illustrator. All right, so we take our sketch, and I'm going to save this first as a Photoshop file, because this is kind of my best idea for how things should work. And I'm going to save it as Carl, Assignment 8, Poster Text Sketch, Photoshop file, to my Assignment 8 folder or to the desktop. And then you can move it to there. But the reason it's so large, this sketch, remember I made it 30 by 40 inches and I cropped it down, but it's at 450 pixels per inch, the same that we colored at, is that this is going to make our poster. And this is what we'll bring our vector line work into and our coloring into, and everything's going to get assembled here, which will give us plenty of space no matter how big we want our poster to be. And in this classroom, we can print up to 17 by 22 inches, which isn't full poster size, but it's pretty good. Full poster size is 18 by 24. And then you can think of like billboards and all kinds of different things. So it's good to save it as a PSD file. Then I'm going to save it without the line art. So it's just the text blocking. And you can just do this as a photograph from your sketch too. But I'm going to save it as just a JPEG. Just a simple, humble JPEG to the desktop. And now we're going to go into Illustrator, everyone's favorite program. Now, why Illustrator? Well, vector shapes are what are used to design typefaces. So I told you about this site, defont.com. I found a few I was interested in. I have Texas Tango. I have Texas TROUPE. How do you download them? You just click on the download button, and you'll get a zip file. So let me find another one. I kind of like this script one here. So I'm going to download Texas Slaughter. It will go, on a Mac, it will go into your downloads folder, right? And then you can move that into your assignment folder like I have. Or already, well, no, maybe not. All right. So then how do you install it? How do you unzip it and make it work? You simply double click on it on the zip file and it will unzip into a folder. You open up the folder. And then if you see this little font icon, it's either going to be a TTF file or an OTF file, either TrueType file or OpenType file. You double click on that, it will automatically open up what's called the font book, and then you just say install font. Now, the fonts are all designed and all will work, but they are sometimes limited. Like you might not have bold or italic or special characters for all of them. Sometimes they'll all be only capitals, things like that. But they are free license for you to use in your own creative work, which is why it's a great site. Now, if you're a working designer and you want to use a specifically designed font, this is kind of a horror movie font, that's fun, then you often pay for them. And you can, that's how type designers make money. You license their fonts. You pay to be able to use them. But there are a lot of good free fonts. Now I'm not, or I should say typefaces, not fonts. We're going to talk about the difference between typeface and fonts. But we are also going to customize the typeface we use. But first you have to install them. So I have quite a few here. I could definitely search a lot longer. I could look for graffiti fonts. I could look for just any kind of subset. But basically, I'll look for ones that are more modern, that don't have serifs, like this one, Texas TROUPE. Yeah, let me show you. So a serif font, come on, open up. This is a serif right here, this little capstone on the E. But mostly this doesn't have serifs.
Well, what's the negative of a serif?
It's called sans serif. It just means without serifs. So you can.
What's the negative of having it?
Oh, what's the negative of it? There's not a negative. It's just an older type of font. So you see that T has decorative serifs at the top and bottom. They're kind of like bone shapes. The R has serifs. The A has serifs. and it makes the text take up more space, while at the same time not being as readable. So since the 20th century, we have modern fonts. So if I look up sans serif as a search, I'm going to get thousands, but these are all what are considered modern fonts, because they don't have any of that decorative end treatment to the letters. And yeah, you can search for all kinds of things. You can just search for modern fonts. There's no shortage. Lots and lots. You can search for graffiti. You can search for tattoo. You know how to spell it, which I'm not sure I do. And anything that you think might work. Also, I mean, honestly, DaFont's a really nice tool. So if you think you might want, let's see, I'll look up bar room. I don't know if this will be anything. No. Let's see, pub, a pub font. So if I see one that I think might be interesting, like this one, serial publication, good for zines and such, I can click on it, and before I download it, I can actually try my text. So I can try in all caps, Texas humility, which is the text I want to use. Submit it, and it will show me its defaults. And actually, that's pretty nice. It's like an old sign, you know, which is kind of what I'm going for. So I might download that one and then move it to my assignment folder. And you can kind of drown in fonts or typefaces. But that's why I'm keeping them in my assignment folder. And then I install it. And now it will work within all the programs, within Word, within Illustrator, within Photoshop. It will store these vectors. Right? And then I have all my other fonts that I've collected. And I really like Insana Burger. That's a good one. And then there's Insana Burger with cheese. And Mega Zero. And Phalanx. And Pokemon Hollow. It's, you know, on and on. Stake Through the Heart. Sugar Plum. Anyway, all of these are free fonts that you might be able to make use of. Or free typefaces. Now, what do we do with our sketch? What we do is we open up the JPEG. So there's my JPEG. I'm going to keep my font select, my typeface selection here, so I remember the names of them. And then I'm going to open my sketch in Illustrator.
When I open my sketch in Illustrator, I ended up getting the no background.
Well, we'll see how it shows up. It's going to want you to live trace it, but we're not going to, because this is just, we're going to onion skin this. And so I'll show you how that works. Okay. And I saved it as a JPEG just to save memory. I could have saved it as a PNG as well, and it would have worked just as well for this. Sometimes Illustrator takes a while to start up when it hasn't been used.
I mean, I can put the black and white around, but only around the image itself, not around the back.
Well, we're going to isolate it on its own layer.
Okay.
So, because we're just using it as a guiding script. All right, so here it is. There's my sketch. You notice how much bigger it is than the artboard, and that's because it's big poster sized in Photoshop. I can shrink it down onto the artboard, but because we're not actually printing out of Illustrator, that doesn't really matter. Now, how do I make this just a background onion skin layer? I double click on it, and I click on dim images to 50%, say OK. So it's kind of in the background. Then I lock it so I don't mess with this layer, and it won't keep asking to live trace it. And then I make a new layer on top of it.